one of the most important things is to know what we believe, particularly on campus, to be able to defend our beliefs. That's perhaps our greatest strength, because pro-choice people throw out slogans and things that are so easy to peel away. They have that one level, that little chant, that little thing that they know, that they say, you know, every child a wanted child and all. And then when you start peeling it away, they don't know where to go. I remember we were doing an interview on 60 Minutes, and we were being interviewed by Leslie Stahl. And she kept saying this comment about abortion, and we're saying, no, Leslie, that's not true. And she kept repeating it, and finally it was so embarrassing, they stopped the interview, and a producer came in and said, you know, Leslie, you're wrong, that they're right, that isn't the issue. Well, she almost, her head almost exploded. Needless to say, they edited the segment out, but the point was, when we know what we believe, we are so much greater activists and advocates for life. We are delighted to have Stephanie Gray, all the way from Canada. She's here. This is suntan weather for Stephanie right now, no problem. And all the way from Canada, she's co-founder of the Canadian Centre for Bioethic Reform, and we are delighted and thrilled that she's here with us. So let's give a warm welcome right now. Stephanie, where are you? Where is she? It's like you're making the long walk from the Golden Globes up to the stage, you know?
Parents. Thank you so much. What a joy to be here with you. Kristen started with such a powerful story about that day on February 1st, 1960, when Joseph McNeil and his 3 friends went into that lunch counter. And as I reflect on that story, I'm reminded that what makes that revolution different from this revolution is that the very people being victimized today cannot stand up for themselves. You see, Joseph and his friends were the victims. That was their cause. But the pro-life cause is not our cause. The pro-life cause is the baby's cause. We are participating in a movement which isn't about us. It's about them. And in a sense, we must be like a different segment of the civil rights movement. We must be like people such as Jim Zwerg, a white civil rights activist who 1 year after the Greensboro Four made that significant moment in history, 1 year later, in 1961, Jim Zwerg was a white civil rights activist taking part in the Freedom Rides in the South. And it was Jim Zwerg who, when the bus came into a town in Alabama, he looked out the window and he saw an angry white mob with chains, with bats, ready to attack anyone who stepped off the bus. And Jim Zwerg, who was not the victim, said, "Let me go first." That is who we are to be for the youngest of our kind. And it's important that as we step forward and be the revolution for the most vulnerable amongst us, that we remember, in a sense, we are being their advocates. And advocates make the case for the other. And in this particular situation, advocates make the case that the other cannot make at all for themselves. And so it is so important we make that case well. And so in the time I have with you this morning, that's what I want to do. I want to equip you to be excellent defenders in the revolution you will participate in for preborn children. The 3 things I'm going to cover this morning are the following. The first is I want to talk about the kind of strategy we need to take when it comes to our encounters with people. Once we are that revolution, we will be conversing with people who don't agree with us. What strategy will help us persuade? That's the first thing I'm going to do. The second thing I'm going to do is talk about how to reach people's minds, and the third will be to discuss how to reach their hearts. So the first thing, that strategy for the conversations we will have with the culture. If we want to communicate well in dialogue, the best way to do that is to study under teachers who communicate well. And the best communicator who ever walked the face of this earth was our Creator himself, Jesus Christ, who created communication. And in the 10th chapter of Luke, Jesus is approached by a scholar of the law who says to him, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Now, who can tell me, what does Jesus do in response? Anyone know? Yes? No, not in that scenario. There were several scenarios where not in that case did he say give everything away. But I'm not interested in what Jesus says. I want to know what he does. He asks a question. Lesson number 1, if you're going to forget everything I say in the next hour, remember this. Ask questions. Ask questions. Jesus asks a question. What does the law say? Now, who did I say Jesus was speaking with? A lawyer, a scholar of the law. Do you think Jesus didn't know that the scholar knew the answer? Why did Jesus ask the question? To get him to think. When we ask questions of someone, wheels turn in our brain. And so Jesus gets the scholar to think. Moreover, by having the scholar answer that question, the scholar will be in a situation in which Jesus is not taking a belief and forcing it into him. Jesus, who is wisdom himself, is going to have the man identify a belief within himself and draw it out of him, so that his argument isn't with Jesus, but with himself. And so he responds, love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus says, you're right. Do that, and you will live. And then the scriptures tell us the scholar wanted to justify himself, and so he prods Jesus a little further. And he says, who is my neighbor? Then what does Jesus do? He tells a story. Lesson number 2 for effective communication in which you want to communicate a powerful point. Tell a story. Because when principles are communicated in isolation, sometimes we have a hard time agreeing with them. But if we can take the principle, like who our neighbors are and what love means, and insert it into a story with a set of circumstances we can relate to and understand. So Jesus starts to talk about the road to Jericho, which in the time of Christ was a very dangerous road. It was known as the Bloody Pass. It was a winding, meandering road conducive to ambushing. So the moment Jesus tells a story about a man being attacked on the road to Jericho, all the listeners could nod in agreement. That's likely. Then Jesus brings characters into his story that the audience knew. Priests, Levites, Samaritans. They knew exactly who those were. And so Jesus takes his principle and he inserts it into a story. That is how we have effective communication. We ask questions, we tell stories. Let me give you an example of how this works in a pro-life conversation or encounter. I was debating with a teenager who thought abortion was okay. At one point in our conversation, she looked at me with some exasperation and she says, look, if you have a fetus in one hand and a baby in the other, you obviously pick the baby. Now, I was thinking, no, you don't. But if I had just said that, she would have said, hey, yes, you do. No, you don't. Yes, you do. And we wouldn't have gotten very far, right? So as it should happen, when she said that, my brain instantly thought, what did she really say? Baby in one hand, fetus in the other, you obviously pick the baby. If I could compare those two, what she was really saying is you have a strong person in one hand and a weak person in the other. You obviously pick the strong person. And once I identified that, I thought, I don't think she thinks that. I don't think she thinks what she just said. How do I communicate that to her? I ask a question, I tell a story, I draw information out of her. And as it should happen, divine inspiration, an image went off in my head like a bomb. And I said that to her. I said, you know, that point you just made is very interesting. It made me think about a picture I just saw on Facebook the other day. Now she's wondering what the picture is. I said, it was a photo of a river. In the middle of the river was this just kind of a half-moon curve of something. And the caption was, "My husband is a hero." So I said to this girl, my friend posted this picture. Beneath the caption, she explained, my husband's a paramedic. He was called to the scene of a car accident at midnight where a woman driving down the road lost control of her vehicle. It spun out of control, landed in the river. She said, when my husband got to the scene of the accident, he jumped in the river to swim towards the car, where sitting atop the car was the woman and her 10-month-old baby in her arms as the car was sinking down. I told the story. I go in for a question. He could only take one person at a time to the shore. Who do you think he took first? What did she say? The baby. What did I do? What did I do? Ask a question. Very good. Remember the one thing you're supposed to remember if you're going to forget everything? That's right. I asked a question. Why? Do you think I didn't know that she knew the answer why? I knew, but I wanted her to articulate it. I wanted her to own it. And so she said, well, obviously, because if he took the mom first when he got back to the car, the baby would have rolled in and drowned. Right, I said. Next question. Do you think he made the right decision? What did she say? Yes. And so I said, it seems to me that you think when you have a stronger person and a weaker person, that you believe we should actually prioritize the weaker person. So wouldn't it follow in this case you mentioned about the baby versus the fetus, that in fact because the fetus is more vulnerable, we are more responsible to care for that fetus? She looked at me and said, you argue well. Now, here's why I say that. Not that she left claiming to be pro-life, because she didn't, but the wheels were turning. She knew something profound had just been communicated to her, but moreover, I didn't argue. I asked a question, or two, or three, and I told a story. That's what we need to do. Now, let's look at that then, step by step in the encounters we have. Moving now, how to reach people's heads. Well, one thing to keep in mind is with the analogy I just gave, some people will object and say, well, wait a minute. With the woman and the baby and the sinking car, both of them were human beings. So in the case of two humans, sure, we can prioritize the more vulnerable one. But in the case of a pregnant woman and her fetus, we're not dealing with two humans, we're dealing with just one. And so we need to focus on the woman. Now, indeed, from the perspective of the abortion supporter, in the situation of that unplanned pregnancy, they're not thinking about the baby, they're thinking about the mother. And in particular, they're looking to the difficult circumstances that a pregnant woman may find herself in. And they think we determine the morality of abortion on a case-by-case basis, looking at whether her circumstances are really tough. So if you were to encounter someone who thought, you know, sometimes we need abortion because of the situation the woman's in, what is one of those situations? Rape, right? See, I can read minds. Okay, just kidding. What's the next one? What's another scenario? Incest. Okay, rape and incest together. What else? Wow, really good. Poverty. I've done a study of my audiences. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, what else? What other circumstances will people give? Education. Health of the mother or the child. Race. Maybe the mom's too young. Maybe she has her career. Maybe she has no support. And we can look at all of these circumstances, and we as pro-lifers can agree those difficult circumstances exist. The question is, may we end the life of an innocent human being because of those circumstances? But how do we get to that point in the conversation? 3 steps. When you ask someone, what do you think about abortion? And when they say, I think it's necessary sometimes, like for reasons of poverty, we're going to take 3 steps to redirect the conversation from the circumstances of the pregnancy to the question we need to figure out, which is, are the preborn human like that infant in the arms of the woman on the sinking car? Are the preborn human? Step number 1, common ground. Why do we want to have common ground with people? So we can agree, so we can build a rapport. Maybe if tensions are high, it's going to bring the tension down a bit. And they're going to feel heard if they can hear us say, I agree with you on whatever we agree with them on. So step 1 is common ground. Step 2 is an analogy or a story, and step 3 is to end it with a question. So let's take the circumstance of poverty. Someone says, we need that for abortion. You say, I agree, it would be difficult to be pregnant and poor. You're right about that. Their ears perk up. Oh, I'm right about something. Yeah. And then we move to the question. Don't start your analogy. Don't start it with a but, because but sounds dismissive. So what I like to say is, imagine this. Imagine you have someone who's a parent of a born child, and she's poor. I end with a question. May we kill that born child because of the mother's poverty? What will they say? No. So then I ask, why then may we kill the preborn child for reasons of the mother's poverty? What will they say? They're not human. That's different. And the moment they say that's different, we realize they don't consider the preborn human like the born. The issue isn't poverty. The issue is, are the preborn human? Take the circumstance of being too young. I agree with you, to be a teenager and pregnant would be very hard. Imagine you have a teenager who's pregnant and thinks it's great. Only after the baby is born determines it's really tough to raise the child. May that teenager kill the 2-year-old because it's hard to raise a child when you yourself are young. They'll say, no. We ask, why then may we kill the preborn child? Because the age of the mother makes her young and difficult, finding it difficult to raise the child. That's different, they'll say. A fetus isn't a person. So that's what we need to focus on. Take the circumstance of rape. Literally just 2 days ago when I flew here, I had a situation arise on the plane that happened probably a year ago before that, where both with the fellow passengers next to me who asked me what I did. And so I told them I do pro-life work and educate about abortion, and then, of course, questions and comments ensue. And in both of these cases, the men I was sitting next to instantly brought up rape. And they said, but what about rape? And I had common ground, and I just jumped straight to a question, which made both of those guys go silent. I said, rape is a horrible thing, and those rapists need to be thrown in jail and forced to do hard labor. One thing we need to ask ourselves, is it fair to give the death penalty to the innocent child? They both kind of stepped back and pushed back in their seat a bit and said, I never thought of it that way. Is it fair to give the death penalty to the innocent child? Now, someone may say, but it's not a child. So that then is what we need to focus on. Is the preborn a human being, a child like you or me? How do we do that now when our conversation has got to that point? One central question to focus our discussion that we will keep coming back to. You say to the person you're speaking with, do you believe in human rights? What are they going to say? Yes. I've yet to encounter someone who doesn't. Then you ask them, who gets human rights? Humans, they'll say. What about this humans' rights? You ask. What will they say? That's not human. What will we do? Ask a question. What are the parents of that embryo? Are they human? Because if they're human, wouldn't it follow that two human parents can only produce human offspring? We know as a society that parents, two humans, cannot produce a cat. I mean, it just can't happen, right? So, I hope neither of these people are in the audience. You know, I fear one day as my audience numbers get larger that they will be there, because if you go to Google Image and type, people with cat, there they are. So, anyways, regardless, we know two human parents can produce a cat, so we want to know what are the parents of that embryo. So then, if they admit that the parents are human, the embryo must be human, they'll say, but it's not alive. Next question, is she growing? Is that one cell growing into 2, and then 4, and then 8, and 16? Is it? What will they have to say? Yes. So wouldn't it follow by virtue of the growth of the embryo that the embryo must be alive? By virtue of having human parents, that the embryo must be human? And since you believe in human rights, shouldn't that human have those rights too? At which point they'll then say, but it's not a human, or it's not a human because it's a fetus. Is that a fetus? The picture there? There we go. Is that a fetus? I heard someone say yes. No. What is it? Well, it is a zygote, correct, or an embryo. Embryo or zygote, either term can work. But let's just say we had a fetus up. So there's a fetus. So now what are we going to do when they say it's just a fetus? Ask a question. And here's the question I like to ask. A fetus what? And then a furrow usually develops in their brow, and they're like, what do you mean? And I purposefully sometimes ask questions to confuse so they think harder. That's a good thing. So a fetus what? They look confused. I say, what kind of fetus? After all, what's that? Well, a dolphin what? A dolphin fetus. That's right, the term fetus is not species specific. Dolphins have fetuses, dogs have fetuses, humans have fetuses. The term fetus tells us how old something is. If we want to know what something is, we ask, what are her parents? And as long as the parents of that fetus or embryo are human, then the embryo or fetus are human as well. Now, at that point in the conversation, the person may say, okay, you know what, you make a good point about it being alive and being human, and I see fetus is just an age category, but you really think at conception, at this moment of fertilization, that you're actually dealing with a human being then? Now, if they say that, I say, well, you know what, if we want to figure out when your life began, knowing that you're a living human with human rights, meaning you get human rights the whole time you exist. When did your life first begin? There's really 3 options, aren't there? Option 1, before fertilization. Option 2, at fertilization. Option 3, sometime after fertilization. So which of these 3 options make the most sense? Well, let's start with option 1. You ask the person, will the sperm in a man's body by itself ever grow into that young child? What will they say? No, right? The guys are thinking, I hope not, right? So it won't. Will the eggs in my body, without any sperm in my body, ever by themselves grow into the young child? No. So option 1 is ruled out. Let's look at option 3, the young child. If we were to say that your human life begins when you're a young child, it will compel a question to be asked. How did the young child come to be? Did she poof appear out of nowhere? And someone say, well, no, she once was an infant. Okay, well, how did the infant come to be? You know, have you ever walked down a road and boom, suddenly an infant just appears like, whoa. No. So, well, the infant was in the mom's body when it was a fetus. Okay, well, we could say the fetus was the stage in which we began our lives, but wait a minute, did the fetus just appear in her body? No, it grew from the embryo, and well, how did the embryo get there? Option number 2. When the sperm and the egg meet, the genetic information which makes me who I am in contrast to all of you, the fact that I was a living being, the fact that I was a human being, began in that instant. But because we're a culture that has a hard time envisioning a tiny speck is a human like all of us, sometimes it helps to tell stories. And so the story I like to tell involves this. What is it? It's a picture. What kind of picture? A Polaroid, that's right, an old technology. So let's say, if we think for a moment about how this technology works, when you put the card in the camera, what does the card look like? White. When you snap a photo and the card comes out, in that moment, immediately, what does it look like? No, it doesn't look white. See, this is how old the technology is. What does it look? Black, browny, smudgy stuff, right? Well, I want you to imagine that you go on vacation and plan to document your whole vacation using your parents' trusty Polaroid camera, because you think that would be cool. And so let's say you go on vacation to where I'm going this year, very excited, haven't been there for 11 years, have a lot of relatives there, my dad's from there. Let's say you go to Scotland. Okay, that's right, you go to Scotland, and while you're in Scotland, you go to a very famous place in Scotland to have a wee bit of a boat tour. You go to Loch Ness. Now, what's in Loch Ness? The monster, that's right. My grandma, she couldn't see her hand in front of her face. She was so blind, but she swore. Out in the distance, she saw the Loch Ness monster. So let's imagine that you go on vacation to Scotland, and you go on this boat tour, and you're taking photos of all the beautiful scenery Scotland has for you to behold. And you're taking photos, and at one point, you turn to your left, and you see none other than Nessie. All the humps and bumps are sticking out of the water. You grab your Polaroid, you snap a photo, the card comes out, and then Nessie goes underwater. Are you upset she's disappeared? No, why? Because you're holding a picture in your hand and you're thinking, I'm going to sell this to magazines and newspapers and make lots of money and prove to people what they thought was a myth is reality. And so as you're looking at this card, what are you going to do? What are you going to do initially? Shake it, shake it, shake it like a Polaroid picture, right? Okay, so you're going to shake it, but let's just say as you're shaking it, there's a tourist in the boat with you who's never seen Polaroid cameras and this technology before, doesn't know how it works. So she excitedly rips it from you mid-shake to have a look. And as she looks at the card, she doesn't see Nessie, she just sees the brown, black, smudgy stuff. She thinks the photo didn't take properly. And with great disappointment, she rips it and tosses it in the lake. Would you be upset? Okay, that's right, my Scottish temper would come out. You don't mess with Braveheart. So, imagine if in getting mad at this tourist, they said, it's just brown smudges. What do you care about brown smudges for? And you'd likely reply, it wasn't just brown smudges. Everything about that image of the Loch Ness monster was captured in an instant. It just needed time to develop. The same can be said about who each one of us is today. We were captured in our uniqueness in that instant of sperm-egg fusion, that instant of fertilization. We just needed time to develop. After you've made that point with someone, they may have another objection. They'll say, well said, if they're intellectually honest. However, but, I took this philosophy course, and I learned that there's a difference between humans and people. And even if your fetus and your embryo are human, they're not people. What are you going to do when someone says that? Ask a question. What's a good question to ask? What's a person? Let's get a definition. Of course, the idea that the preborn and even some infants aren't people, even if they're human, originates, well, maybe it doesn't originate, but who's a big proponent of this idea? Peter Singer, that's right, professor at Princeton. Well, you know, I was trying to rack my brain. Why is Peter Singer's philosophy becoming so accepted amongst college students? Like, why do they think this is like the best thing since sliced bread? That comment makes me sound old. Like, who says that anymore? Anyways, okay, so regardless, they think this is some amazing, profound comment. I was like, why? Thinking to myself, why? And then I figured out why Peter Singer's argument is so popular. It's because he has an accent. That's right. You see, Dr. Singer's from Australia. I'll admit it's an accent that I can't do, but quite frankly, I like the British accent better, not to offend the Australian nun in the crowd today. So anyways, let's imagine that I was a student in Dr. Peter Singer's class. And if I was a student in his class, my dialogue, my questioning with him would go something like this. Yes, matey, whatever he would say. Let's not give him an accent, then I'll sound even smarter. So Dr. Singer says, yes, and I said, Dr. Singer, if I could just ask a question to clarify here. Dr. Singer, are you saying that the one-celled human embryo is not a person? Yes, correct. That's exactly what I'm saying. Dr. Singer, just a follow-up question. Why? Why is the one-celled human embryo not a person? Well, it's not a person because it's not a rational being. It's not self-aware. It's not conscious. Oh, I see. Right. Dr. Singer, sorry, just another question. I'm just wondering, why isn't the one-celled human embryo rational, self-aware, conscious? Well, it's not because it doesn't have a brain. Sorry to be pesky, Dr. Singer, but just another question. I'm wondering, why doesn't it have a brain? Getting tired with me at this point, obviously not around children who always ask why repeatedly. So I'm around kids a lot, that's why I take this strategy on. It's very effective. So why don't they have a brain? Well, they haven't developed a brain yet. Sorry, Dr. Singer, one more question. Why haven't they developed a brain yet? Well, they haven't had the time. That's a very good point, Dr. Singer. And in fact, what that makes me think about is that time is reflected in our age. And indeed, you are correct that they can't think and they aren't rational because they don't have a brain. And they don't have a brain because they haven't developed the brain. And they haven't developed the brain because they haven't had time because they're too young. Dr. Singer, do you believe those of us who are older have a right to kill those who are younger? And at that point, you really hope you're older than him. Ultimately, this notion of personhood is grounded in age discrimination. Let's take a one-celled human embryo in contrast to an amoeba. Can either of those two things think? No. So we ask that question all 2-year-olds love to ask. Why? Why can't the amoeba think? And why can't the human embryo think? And the answer to that question is very different. The amoeba cannot think because of what it is. It's not within its nature to be a thinking thing. But the one-celled human embryo cannot think because of how old she is. And if we believe in human rights, then humans get human rights, regardless of their age. Personhood is a tool that's being used for the strong to override the rights of the weak. Something we've seen time and again in history, where women were denied personhood status, blacks were denied personhood status, Jews were denied personhood status. Time and again throughout history, humans with human rights being deprived of those rights because other humans say they're not persons. By focusing the conversation on human rights and showing how personhood in the context of abortion is merely age discrimination, we'll go far in our encounters. When you communicate with someone and go through all of this, you may find them saying, well, even if they are persons, they don't have a right to use the mother's body without her consent. How many of you have heard of Judith Jarvis Thompson's Unstringing the Violinist analogy? She's a philosopher who puts forward this argument essentially saying, imagine that you are kidnapped one evening. You wake up in a hospital, plugged into a stranger. A doctor comes in the room and says, I'm terribly sorry about the situation you find yourself in. But you see, last night, you were kidnapped by the Society for Music Lovers because there was this world-famous violinist who was going to die, and they found out that you were the only person who had the right body type to keep him alive. So they kidnapped you so they could plug him into you so he doesn't die. Good news is this isn't forever. It's just for 9 months. And she comes up with this analogy to say, look, is the violinist a human? Yes. A person? Yes. But does he have a right to use your body without your consent? No. And just as you have every right to reach around and unplug the violinist, so too can a woman unplug her fetus as a human person with no right to her body. What do we say? Well, some people will say, well, wait a minute, killing is different from unplugging. If this is to be analogous, you'd have to chop the violinist up with a machete to make it analogous to abortion. What's the weakness with that? The abortion supporter will say, well, let's just change our method of abortion. Let's make it true unplugging, mere removal. Will the pro-lifer be satisfied? No. So then the pro-lifer may say, well, when we consent to actions, we have to accept the consequences, and you didn't consent to being kidnapped, but when you have sex, you consent to that, you have to accept pregnancy. Where's the weakness? Rape. What if a woman hasn't consented? So then you may say, but parents have a special responsibility to their offspring. We don't have to strangers. So the violinist is a stranger. He's not one of your dependents. Someone in your city could be starving. If you don't feed them, you're not going to be charged with neglect. But if your offspring in your home is starving, you'll say your 2-year-old, you will be charged with neglect. Seems stronger, but then you may find yourself in a situation, as I was once in, with a philosophy prof debating at a university who took the analogy and made it his own to make it a parent-child relationship. He said, you've got a child with kidney disease. Your child is going to die unless you donate your kidney. It won't kill you to donate your kidney. It would be nice of you to donate your kidney. It will save your child's life to donate your kidney. But the law should not force you to donate your kidney. And just as the law should not force you to give one of your body parts for your child, nor should the law force a woman to give her uterus for her child. Professor speaking, Stephanie sitting, taking notes, thinking, dear Lord, what do I say? No joke, seriously, sending up instant, really fast, high-speed prayers to heaven. I need some inspiration here, Lord. I've got 10 minutes on the clock. I need some inspiration here. So I didn't actually audibly hear the voice of God, but I did sense the voice of God. And it was like God said to me, Stephanie, I made the uterus for a different purpose. So I'm ruminating over this for 10 minutes as I'm taking notes, and it was like, I see the light. I get up, and I say, Dr. Snedden makes a very compelling argument until we ask ourselves a question. What is the nature and purpose of the kidney versus the nature and purpose of the uterus? For the answer to that question will tell us why the law shouldn't force us to give our kidneys, but should, in a sense, compel us to give our uteruses. The kidney exists in my body for my body. But my uterus, unlike all other body parts, exists in my body every month, getting ready for someone else's body. I can live. Praise Jesus. I can live without my uterus, but my offspring cannot, which is a sign it exists more for the other, unlike all other organs, than it exists for me. That professor told his class 2 days later that he was up all night trying to think of a response to that. And so that's the problem when you've got lies on your side and truth on the other side. Because when the truth is on your side, you can't argue it. Having said all of that, at the end of the day, you'll encounter a person who will say, no pun intended, person. Anyways, you'll encounter a person who will say, I agree. It makes sense. And you've convinced me to never, personally, ever have an abortion. But I just can't force my views on other people. When you encounter someone who says that, what 2 strategies do you want to employ? Ask question, tell story. So then you say, you know, I think I hear where you're coming from. It makes me think, if we had a big bowl of candy before us, and we wanted to have a bit of a battle of the border, where we had some Canadian candy and some American candy in this bowl. So we've got some Smarties, which apparently you guys have in the States, but they're not really Smarties. They're like what we call Rockets, which are these powdery, sugary, kind of hard thingies. But our Smarties are more like M&Ms, but not, because they're better. So anyways, in this bowl, you've got real Canadian Smarties, and then you've got chocolate M&Ms, because that's what Smarties are similar to. So you could say to the person, we could do a taste test, and you may prefer M&Ms. Does that mean you should force me to eat M&Ms and no Smarties because that's what you prefer? What will they say? No, of course not. And you can say, I agree, because I like my Smarties. No, I agree. So then you say, but imagine, within this bowl of candy, some of the candies have poison injected into them, and anyone who eats those candies will die. Imagine with this knowledge you have, I say, hold on a second, I'm just gonna go out into the hallway and offer to the people sitting at the booths if they'd like some candy. Would you stop me? What will they say? Yes. Then you ask why. What will they say? Because the choice now is a choice that could be lethal. At which you say, then it seems to me that you think in some cases, like preference issues, we shouldn't force our views on others. But there's other scenarios that we would call moral issues, where the choice someone could make is lethal to another, and not only would it be appropriate for you yourself to avoid the poisonous candy, but it would be very appropriate for you to force your views on others and stop me from distributing them to others so you can save others from that lethal choice. What we've covered so far is about making the case that the preborn are human, like the people in the hallways at the booth. Humans that we need to be concerned about. But what I've covered so far has actually not yet made the case for the fact that the act of abortion is lethal. What I've covered is equivalent to that. Would this picture tell us anything about the Holocaust? Does it convey the horror of the Holocaust? Does it convey that the Holocaust is a lethal choice? No, this picture serves an important purpose, as everything I've just shared serves an important purpose. It establishes what a Jewish family looked like, who they are, and everything I've gone through establishes who the preborn are. But there's a corresponding question that we need to answer in our encounters with others, and that is the choice we're discussing lethal? That question is answered by this photo in the affirmative when it comes to the Holocaust. Yes, that choice is lethal. When it comes to abortion, is that choice lethal? Just as the images we saw communicate a message more powerfully than words can, I believe the same is true that when we're encountering people, there comes a point where there's an essential component in our encounter where we must communicate that abortion is lethal. And we must do it visually because pictures have a way of burning themselves into our memory such that they change how we feel. And if you can change how someone feels, you can change how they behave. Case in point, the state of Montana. Presently, they rank 39th across your great country for crystal meth abuse. In 2005, they ranked 5th. In less than a decade, that state moved from 5th to 39th. How? Because of this. Graphic billboards that were distributed and set up throughout the state, disturbing commercials showing the consequences of crystal meth use. And when people saw images like this, it changed how they felt. And when it changed how they felt, it changed how they behaved. Or take late December 2004. An online internet portal that receives millions of dollars of charitable giving every year saw their donations skyrocket late December 04 in contrast to the previous December of 03. They had 6 times the number of donations. What happened between December 03 and late December 04 to explain this behavior change? The Southeast Asian tsunami. And in the days following Christmas, on people's television sets, they were bombarded with images of the utter devastation this natural disaster caused. 200,000 lives wiped out. And when people saw those images, they felt differently. And when they felt differently, they behaved differently. And more people than normal donated to help the needy because of what they saw. Or take the 12th of September, 2001. On that day, blood banks across the United States had a very unusual problem. They had a shortage, not of blood, but of bags, with which to store a 16-fold increase in blood donations in comparison to the 10th of September, 2001. What happened between the 10th and the 12th of September to explain this behavior change but 9/11? And when people saw images of those planes crashing into the towers, of people in the fiery inferno in panic leaping to their deaths, they felt differently. And when they felt differently, they behaved differently. People who ordinarily hate the sight of blood, hate the feeling of a pinprick, strategy of whether the blood donations were needed aside, their feeling change prompted a behavior change. Our goal in the pro-life movement is a radical behavior change. But to change how people behave, we need to change how they feel. Pictures change how they feel. Most fundamentally, though, I have a whole separate lecture I give to people on pro-life strategy and the use of imagery, abortion victim photography. Setting all of that aside, I think the important role abortion victim photography plays in our encounter can be summed up with this statement. We're not the victims, the babies are. This is their story. And their story has a right to be told as it happened. Would we ever tell a victim of the Rwandan genocide, coming to share what happened, that she must share her story behind a black screen because her scarred face from the machete is too disturbing for the audience to see? Would we ever tell a victim of a drinking and driving accident who survived that they must only tell their story on radio, for if it ever involved them being on TV, people would be too horrified by the burns and the skin grafts all over their disfigured body? We would never do that because they're the victims. And the victims' stories need to be told. So let us see the preborn victim's story. allowing our hearts to be moved. For as it said in that popular Hillsong song, break our hearts for what breaks yours. We'll have the video now.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That all men are created equal. That all men are created equal. Created
When I was once standing with still images of what you just saw, a single mother walked up to me on the campus I was at, told me that she had an abortion, and asked me how I could justify having the images knowing there were other students like her on campus. After we went back and forth, I remembered my approach of stories and questions, and I had a bottle of water with me. And I said, I think I can best explain why I have these pictures, if you'll bear with an analogy, if that's okay. She said, sure. I said, you see this water here? I want you to imagine that there's poison in the water. I don't know there's poison in the water. I drink it, and I die. Have I knowingly committed suicide? What did she say? No. I said, now I want you to imagine, I still don't know there's poison in the water, but you do. You see me grab it. You see me unscrew the lid. You see me bring it to my mouth. I drink it. You don't stop me. I die. Have you been an accomplice to my murder? She said, yes. I said, that's why I'm here with the pictures. Because a lot of people haven't seen what I've seen, don't know what I know, and they're making choices out of ignorance, like drinking the poisoned water and not knowing. But if I see them drink, and I don't tell them what I know, then the blood is on my hands. As another post-abortive woman once said to me, nobody told me it looked like that. Had someone only told her a few months before that moment we encountered each other, a few hours north of where we were standing, had someone only told her it looked like that, she would have had a baby in her arms instead of a child in the trash. It is imperative, as we create this revolution so desperately needed, that we know how to engage well with people, that we know how to reach their minds and also their hearts. And you may find yourself in scenarios, as I have found myself, imparting everything that I have shared so far today, and nothing is getting through to the person. It's like a wall has been built up, and I'm thinking, I'm logical, I'm asking good questions, I've got good evidence. How can you argue with the pictures? But they're not agreeing with me. You know, when students would say to me, I'm interested in doing full-time pro-life work, what should I study? I used to advise people to study history, philosophy, English to learn to write well, because that's my pet peeve. But now my answer is different. Now I advise people who want to work in the pro-life movement to study psychology. What you will discover is that what often seems to be a problem here is a problem here. And unless we deal with where the person is coming from, which can only be discerned by lovingly and gently asking questions, which can only be discerned by making the prayer of our heart the prayer of St. Francis, O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be understood as to understand. When we seek to understand, then we can minister. I was speaking with a young guy about abortion, and he was quite angry as we were dialoguing, and he was arguing about personhood. And I said, look, in your world, you could be a victim of your philosophy. You could meet someone who comes up with a different definition of person, a definition that excludes you. But in my world, you're safe, because in my world, by virtue of being a member of the human family, you have the right to life. And he looked at me and he said, in your world, I wouldn't exist. Do you think I knew what he was talking about? No, I'm really not the mind reader when I had that first click right. I had no idea, so what did I do? I asked a question. What do you mean, I said. My mother had an abortion. She had an abortion shortly before she got pregnant with me. If she'd never have had that abortion, I wouldn't be here. And my heart broke. That man's very existence is rooted in the dismemberment of his sibling. Of course, he's not going to accept the pro-life worldview. Because if he does, what does that mean? What does that mean about the mother he very likely loves? And so that is where we have to go off script. We throw the arguments, we throw the philosophy, we throw the science aside. We seek to understand. How's your mom doing, I asked. Have you ever thought about that sibling? I don't know where the conversation's going to go. All I know is that I'm seeking to understand, and I'm trying to go here. And he kept bringing it up here, and I kept bringing it down here, because I knew that's what needed to be addressed. During a Q&A once, a student got up and asked about rape. I gave the answer I gave earlier, plus more detail. She wasn't satisfied. So I said, look, I can take more questions from you one-on-one because there's other students I need to take questions from. She accepted that at the end, sure enough, came to the podium. She and I are having a one-on-one. She can't accept the logic, and I'm thinking my case is airtight. Why can't she accept it? And then I thought, maybe, just maybe, there's a personal experience here that's caused her to build up a wall. And so I said something to convey empathy, insight, and to try to possibly draw something out if my gut was right. I said, I have a friend who was molested as a child. I'm one of the few people who know it. And I have seen the total pain that this has caused her life, and that it's going to take a lifetime, pregnant or not, abortion or not. It will take a lifetime to work through that trauma that abortion doesn't take away. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, 10 years and counting. I said, I'm sorry for your suffering. She said, I'm sorry for your friend. And I asked, are you safe? Is the person who hurt you still in your life? And so the conversation went down the path of her heart and caring for her well-being, because people will have a difficult time learning to love the other if they haven't seen an example set for them. But if when they encounter pro-lifers, they experience not only our love for the babies, but our love for them, it will open their hearts and their minds to a whole new world, a world that they were made to live in, a world in which love is wanting the other's good. You know, when we think about the Greensboro Four and the hundreds and thousands that followed them, we can be encouraged to know that 6 months later, on the 26th of July, 1960, Woolworth desegregated its lunch counters. When I have studied the civil rights movement, what has struck me about that movement is that they were a faith-based movement. Yes, the argument can be made, as I have, without religion. But what drove them was love for Creator and His creatures. I would like to leave you with just a small portion of Psalm 27, which was the psalm the civil rights activists, 1 year after the Greensboro Four, on that night before the bus ride in which Jim Zwerg was the first to get off, the first to be brutally attacked and hospitalized, the psalm that they read, the psalm that Jim Zwerg uttered under his breath as he was under attack. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom shall I dread? When evildoers came upon me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and my enemies, they stumbled and fell. Though a host encamp against me, my heart will not fear. Though war rise against me, in spite of this, I shall be confident. The Lord is my light and my salvation. May that be the prayer of your heart as you move forward to be the revolution for the youngest of our kind. Thank you, and God bless.
Let's hear it for Stephanie, come on.